Before we get into the main podcast, it's just a quick message. This podcast was recorded over a month ago, and the reason why I wasn't able to bring it out earlier was my health. As many of you know, I do have cancer and I was having chemotherapy. And so it really did take a lot out of me. And so I wanted to put this podcast out a long time ago, but Alhamdulillah, I wasn't able to. But Alhamdulillah, it's out now. And what I wanted to say, which isn't mentioned in the podcast, is that Hanan, who's my guest, has written a chapter for my book, Hands Off Our Hijab. And it's now in the book because there are more details which we weren't able to go into in the podcast, which she has included in that chapter. And when I first wrote that book, Hands Off Our Hijab, the whole hijab bans in India had not even happened. But I thought it was so important to have that chapter in the book because that is something that is so relevant and is affecting our sisters so immensely in India. And I wanted someone from India who could write about what's happening and knows firsthand what our sisters are going through. So that's in there. And Alhamdulillah, the one main reason that chapter was we were able to write that was because I have patrons. They're people who they they give me money through my Patreon account every month, and I use that money to pay Hanan to write the chapter because I think it's so important that when Muslim women writers, especially ones who are not living in the West, who are putting their time and effort into writing, they should be paid for their work. And my patrons, they Alhamdulillah, reward them and bless them. They're constantly in my duas. They made that possible. So, inshallah, if you would like to support my work and the work of writers, because I will be asking more writers, Muslim women internationally who are writers, to include chapters in my upcoming books and my existing books. If you'd like to support that work, you can even just donate £1 or $1. It's completely up to you. But the link for my Patreon is in the notes for this podcast. But that's the message I just wanted to let you know. So inshallah, I hope you enjoy this podcast. And I'd just like to thank you all for your du'as as well for my health. May Allah, improve your health and the health of your families as well. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Take care. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Smart Muslimah podcast. Inshallah, today we are going to be speaking about the rising injustices against the Muslims in India and the hijab ban protests in Karnataka. Now, today I have with me Hanan Irfan. She's an engineer, an independent writer, and a teacher who lives in India. And I thought it's so important to hear from sisters who are living in India, who can then really explain to the rest of us who are not in the middle of, the problems that they are facing, that they can tell us what is happening and really what we as Muslims who are not facing these problems, what can we do to help, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, Hanan.
Alaikum assalam, Farhat. I'm very grateful to be back on the podcast with you. Inshallah, to discuss what's been going on in India.
Yes, alhamdulillah. You have been on the podcast previously. We were discussing Khalid Hosseini's books, isn't that right?
Right.
And that was such a popular podcast, Hannah, and it's had so many listens. So alhamdulillah, I'm so happy.
I'm so glad
to have you back on. So really, please could you explain to us what is going on in India regarding that in some schools in Karnataka in particular, why has the hijab been banned?
Right. So I think it's not just Karnataka anymore. Actually, this started from the very beginning of this year. It started on January 1st when 6 Muslim hijabi girls in a college in Karnataka, they were stopped from entering the college. And they were told that the hijab is not a part of the uniform, so they will not be allowed to attend the classes. The problem is that these girls had been wearing hijab since the first day they had started attending the college. Some of them had been wearing it for 3 years. So it was really weird that all of a sudden this order had been passed that they will no longer be allowed to do that. So obviously they protested. And the next thing we hear that several other colleges across Karnataka are following the same ban. And it
Hmm.
was yeah, so it was really weird to us, like how is it that all of a sudden this issue that had not been brought up previously, and suddenly so many of these colleges are doing the same thing, that is banning hijab. And
Hmm.
it spread from college to college and then from district to district, and now it's no longer just Karnataka, it is spreading like a wildfire throughout the country in different states from south to the north. So what happened was that these girls finally filed a petition in the court, and then meanwhile as the case is going on in the court, there were lots of protests, demonstrations, and while Muslims were demonstrating and protesting, they were heckled, and they were countered by a lot of Hindu goons, so who tried to protest with saffron shawls. So here they are trying to draw an equivalence between the hijab and saffron shawls, and the significance of saffron being that saffron is the color of Hindu supremacy or Hindutva. And so they said that if Muslims are going to be allowed to display their religious symbols or to display their religion in public, so we will do the same. And they started harassing public officials and creating a lot of breakdown of law and order. And they threatened that as long as Muslims continue to wear hijab in public institutions, we will continue this demonstration. So this
Hmm.
is the current situation till now. The court has offered no relief. There are demonstrations after demonstration, protest after protest, and finally the court has just passed an interim order saying that Muslim students should not insist on wearing the hijab as long as the verdict is still being decided upon. So
I
this is the
see.
current situation that we are.
Hmm. So now, previous to this ban, now in India, like Alhamdulillah, there are millions of Muslims. Compared, there are more Muslims in India than in Pakistan, and
That 200 million Muslims.
200 million. Subhanallah, I didn't know that. And so, and the norm in India, well, relations between, let's say, before the BJP and
Right.
Modi's government has come into power, would you say that relations between Muslims and Hindus was better?
That is a pretty tricky question because communal polarization has always been a problem in India, whether you see it before independence or you see it after independence. But as long as we are talking about comparisons, then I would say that yes, definitely. The communalism has become more brazen. I wouldn't say that it has, I don't know, like started right now or it is
Mm-hmm.
something new. Definitely not. A communalism, anti-Muslim hatred, Islamophobia has always been a problem in India. The only difference is that it has become very brazen. Earlier, people would like have these Islamophobic conversations within their homes, and they wouldn't be so like brazen about it. But
Yes.
now everything is being done in the open, and they're very proud of their Islamophobia.
Mm-hmm. And is that because they know that officials or the police, they will not do anything about, if they act upon or even say things?
Definitely. Even though previous to the BJP, the Congress government did not do much for Muslims, and in fact, put the segregation and marginalization of Muslims into place, it was not so brazen about it. It acted like they are allies of Muslims. But the BJP, they have been very open about this, and they have specifically directed the police and the government officials to not take any actions against anti-Muslim riots or pogroms. Just as we speak right now, there is a riot going on in Karnataka. So
Mm-hmm.
Hindu goons, yeah. So Hindu goons, they have transported trucks of stones and rocks and brought them into Muslim areas, and they are pelting these stones at Muslim-owned businesses and property and homes, and several
Mm-hmm.
people have been beaten up. So just as we speak, this is going on, and the
Yeah.
police is doing absolutely nothing.
I know, and one of the reasons why I felt it was so important to do this podcast is because we are not hearing about this in the news. You know, the BBC, they're not talking about it. I don't know, is Sky talking about it? Maybe Al Jazeera is speaking about it. Muslim outlets, I think, are, but it's being underreported. And what will be reported is, you know, India is the biggest democracy in the world. There's certain things that people know about India. So, okay, Bollywood and the food and just about tourism and how economically well it's doing. But this behavior is, the anti-Muslim, the violence, it's all under the radar. And I do think that we need to know about it, but and also it's because then we, inshallah, and we'll speak about this later in the podcast, as far as what you as a Muslim living in India, what you feel we can do to help. But I'm interested that, in the Muslims in India, just like the Muslims anywhere in the world, when it comes to hijab, everyone knows it's an obligation. It's part of our culture. It's part of our, it's just part of our DNA. Everyone knows Muslim women, they wear hijab, some don't, but the majority, it's not even a matter of question. But when I was doing some reading around this topic, there seems to be this ridiculous narrative that's being propagated by Hindus, in particular, Hindu fundamentalists, that somehow hijab is not even obligatory anymore, that somehow the girls who are wearing it, they are extremists.
Definitely. And though I like to point out, this is not a stance of just Hindu extremists. This is a very liberal stance in India. It is actually considered a very tolerant stance to believe that hijab is not an obligation. We have these public intellectuals and feminists and women rights groups and several renowned TV reporters and journalists. And even inside the court, the lawyers are arguing whether hijab is a fundamental or an essential part of Islam or not. And somehow they are trying to establish that hijab is not essential. And if it's not essential, why are you insisting on wearing the hijab? So somehow, this issue that was about protecting the practices of the minority people, that is the Muslims in India, it has somehow become about how these minority, the Muslims, are insisting on practicing something that is not even essential, just for the sake of, polarizing people or asserting their religion.
I
So the
see.
victims have been criminalized. And it is a
Yes.
very liberal discussion, I would say. It is
Mm.
not considered extremist in India to be so openly against hijab.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it reminds me of the similar attitude that exists in France, where they're saying that when women wear hijab and when Muslims openly show symbols of their religion, that somehow that they are causing they are segregating themselves. So
Exactly.
it's interesting that India and France are using the same argument. But India, how would you say that India is, like, in my understanding, India is supposed to be a secular country. It's like they want to force Hinduism more into society, and this very proud, like, Hindu culture that they want to. It's like they want India to be even more Hindu. But I'm wondering, the young, in every country, the youth are usually are becoming more liberal, and they are more secular. So I'm wondering that in these schools and colleges, and even just in India generally, the Hindu youth, are any of them speaking up against this? Are any of them, they must have Muslim friends. Because I'm comparing it to here when, for example, the Black Lives Matter protests happened. You had white youth, you had, Asian, everyone was very united that yes, racism is wrong. This, kind of prejudice is wrong. Violence against Black people is wrong. Is there any kind of sentiment like that amongst the Hindu youth in India?
Unfortunately, I cannot sugarcoat this thing.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be very realistic about what's happening on ground.
Yes.
When the hijabi girls started protesting against their colleges, they were faced with their own classmates, their own colleagues who came to the college wearing saffron turbans and saffron shawls and saying that they're not able to concentrate on their studies because these Muslim girls are asserting their religion, and if these Muslim girls are allowed to practice theirs, then they will practice their own Hindu religion. And the matter of fact is that Muslims have never protested against Hindus showing the religion. If they want to dress
Yes.
in their, yeah, exactly. So we have never protested against that. But they are drawing a false equivalence between hijab and saffron shawls. So it was these very classmates of these girls who turned against them.
Mm-hmm.
Then, secondly, I'd say that on social media, you'd find um, some sentiment of liberal Hindus who would say that, okay, we are against hijab, it is very patriarchal, but we support the rights of the minorities. So it's a very conditional support that is coming from the liberal Hindus, and that
Mm-hmm.
too only on social media. When we talk on ground, there's absolutely no support. I will not sugarcoat it.
No
The
support.
protests are, yeah, the
Mm-hmm.
protests are being led by Muslims, Muslim men and Muslim women, girls and boys. But from the majority community, there's only lip service and no actual concrete step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that because when I was looking to see on Twitter, is there, Hindu thinkers, liberal Hindu writers, where are they? And I couldn't see any support. I'm even thinking, you have like Hindu actors, famous ones. I don't suppose they've said anything either because they don't want to be aligned with the Muslims.
I'd say that even the ones who are supporting are merely doing lip service on social media, because
Mm-hmm.
them tweeting a thing or two, it does not change the ground reality. And even among them, the majority of people are offering very conditional support. For example, some would say, okay, allow the hijab, but not the niqab. So you
Right.
cannot dictate how a Muslim woman would follow her religion. So the support is very conditional. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it amounts to anything unless you unconditionally stand with the persecuted community.
Yes, exactly. And this is it, that because the Hindus are in the majority. And, for example, here you have, progressive people who would call themselves Hindu and they are progressive as well, or Indians who are progressive. And I don't see, again, there isn't that noise and that awareness being created that you saw with the Black Lives Matter. The comparisons are like, night and day, that when it comes to a Muslim issue, and in particular, okay, you mentioned the word patriarchy, because then that's the thing that, or there's been silence from the feminists. I have not
Definitely.
seen, when I think of okay, like for example, Kate Winslet on her Instagram, when the Taliban took over Afghanistan, again that very stereotypical picture of a girl in a woman in a blue burqa, and again saying that some certain the women's lives are have gone back into the dark ages. And I'm thinking, you're an actress, but you have to negatively comment on the situation of Muslim women, even though you have no understanding, you haven't visited, you haven't spoken to these women. And again, who's that other woman, Angelina Jolie, all the usual suspects. Even
Yes.
Malala, I don't know, have you, whether Malala Yousafzai has commented. I hope she has, because she should, because this is education and this is women, two things that she does care a lot about.
Yes,
But
Malala has commented on
oh,
this and she
alhamdulillah,
has shown
good.
support.
Excellent. Yeah, again, credit where credit's due. Mel reward her for raising this issue. I've seen there's a revert brother, Sonny B. Williams. He's an Australian. He's a very famous sports person. On his Instagram page, he said, "I support my sisters in India, and that he's saying, I'm sending you love and duas." And the thing is that it's that kind of support that sisters in India who are facing, like my heart breaks. Like I think of my own daughter, I think of myself, that if I was forced to choose between studying or following my religion, especially if you're poor, if education is a way out of poverty, or it's a very hard, it's not an easy decision to make. And may Allah make it easy for them. It does make me think that as Muslims, again, I'm wondering, what about the Muslim famous actors? I know I don't have I have good hopes for them. Have they spoken about this?
Absolutely not.
Oh
That is
God.
the problem. Yes, I think when one thinks of India and you're not in India, you're not an Indian, there are two things that one thinks of. One is Taj Mahal and the other would be Shah Rukh Khan.
Oh, that's it. I'm
So,
thinking of the Khans. I'm thinking
exactly.
of Amir Khan, Shah Rukh Khan, and I can't stand Salman Khan. But so okay, is it radio silence from them then?
Absolutely. So I think it is a very layered. First of all, that the elite Muslims who do not have much to lose, and they're essentially very de-Muslimized themselves, like
I
the
see.
Khans of Bollywood. So
Hmm.
they do not want to risk their own career and their own popularity by speaking on politics. So they have always remained very apolitical. Yet, despite that, the current government is out to get them. For
Yes.
example, yes. So no matter how much you try to de-Muslimize yourself and you try to separate yourself from Islam, they will come for you. But
Mm.
I guess they do not realize that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
there's
it.
simply
This,
radio silence from them.
yeah, this is it. That you think why not? Like, they are multimillionaires, and there are a number of Muslims in high positions, and you think. I was thinking you could gain so much reward. You could secure your Jannah by speaking up and and helping your sisters. But it's such a shame that they've chosen money and fame and prestige over
Definitely.
helping. Whereas alhamdulillah, there are famous Muslims who, they've decided we don't care if we lose sponsorships, we will speak about Muslim international issues. Uh,
Exactly.
alhamdulillah, may Allah reward them for that. So, life for a Muslim living in India. So there's now this hijab ban is happening. That are Muslims finding that they're having to, like, do they tend to then think, okay, I mustn't be so visible about my Islam, men and women? Do you find people are changing their behavior to protect themselves?
Well, definitely, there are always people who try to distance themselves from Islam or the persecuted identity in order to save themselves, but it eventually comes to get them. You cannot distance yourself forever. But
Mm-hmm.
in the specific hijab case, it is very strategic, the timing and everything, because the exams for colleges are merely 1 or 2 months away. And so they especially raised this issue right now because it would harm the studies of these girls. So they will
Mm-hmm.
be they cannot afford to escape college. If they skip college right now, they'll lose an entire year. So many of the girls many of the girls are in this situation where they have to choose between wearing hijab and missing an entire year of college, maybe the entire degree, or just like settling for another month and taking off their hijab and going in.
Yes.
So it is a very, very difficult situation. Many of them have chosen to protest and not attend the classes. But there are many people, especially Muslim women who are working, who are running their homes on their salaries. They cannot
Yes.
afford to quit. And
Mm-hmm.
Muslims are a very, very marginalized community in India, probably the most marginalized community.
Mm-hmm.
So one cannot expect them to give up their livelihood, especially where they're coming from. So many women, and they have chosen to maybe take off their hijab at the gate. They come from their homes in hijab, and before the gate, they take off their hijab because they need to earn.
Mm-hmm.
They need to run their homes, and obviously we cannot blame them.
Yeah.
So it is very humiliating because the media and the camera people, they wait for these women to come to the gates and they hide. And while they are taking off their hijab and the niqab, they record it and then they upload it
Astaghfirullah.
on social media for the whole world to see. So it is
Yeah.
very, very humiliating.
It's disgusting, and this is it, that they're choosing this just shows how cowardly they are, that they're choosing the weakest, the sisters who are the
Absolutely.
most vulnerable, who are in the weakest position, and then they're doing, like, putting pressure on them. This is what it is. This just shows how disgusting and again how low these people are, that the fact that they do not intellectually, they cannot convince, they know they've lost the battle intellectually. So our sisters will never leave Islam. They'll always have the belief. But then they thought, what can we pick on? What's the weak spot? And that's what they've chosen. And that
Absolutely.
shows, how, as far as Hinduism, we didn't, no one, we don't, no one who's listening to this podcast needs to be told about to worship idols is just makes no sense. Their religion, their caste system, they even oppress their own people.
Yeah, I think that is a really complex discussion
Yes.
because what is Hinduism and whether they form a communal majority or not, that is still something that is in great debate even in India, and whether the lower castes and your tribal people, they recognize themselves or as Hindus, because there are several lower castes who have been fighting to liberate themselves from these clutches of this blanket idea of Hinduism and
Mm-hmm.
refuse to be labeled under the caste hierarchy that Brahmanism has created. So I believe that that is a very complex discussion, which
Mm-hmm.
cannot be handled in this podcast.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're not going to go into that. But just to, if anyone listening is interested and has the time, I would definitely say to research the, Hindu. When I was at college, I actually did read, but I remember just being flabbergasted that this is the religion and that what can the Muslims, so a Muslim who's listening to the podcast, what should what should we be doing to help the Muslims in India? Like, if you could give us just either three practical things that we can do that would make a difference, inshallah.
I think that social media has a lot of power because the mainstream media often tends to ignore these narratives that are coming from Muslims and tends to plaster their own liberal and conditional support that they have or their own interpretation. So I believe what global Muslims can do is that reshare what Muslim women are talking about and what they are doing in India right now. So, yeah, just spread awareness in social media. Secondly, I think that I have seen in a lot of places like Kuwait and maybe in some places in Europe, I'm not sure, where Muslim women have started demonstrations before the Indian embassy and
Mm-hmm.
against this hijab ban. So I think that can build some pressure because India is very conscious of its image abroad and it wants to maintain that image of unity and diversity and secularism and whatnot. And it would be really harmful for India to see that image being crushed down.
Mm-hmm.
So there are two things that we can do. And thirdly, obviously, there is no substitute for dua.
Mm-hmm.
We would ask Muslims to across the world to make as much dua as possible because it's not just about hijab. It's not just about the way we dress. Um, I'm sure you must have heard about Professor Gregory Stanton, the founder of Genocide Watch, who recently made a statement that India is dangerously close to a genocide, Muslim genocide. And
Mm-hmm.
he was the one who had even predicted the Rwandan genocide. So we are not in an easy situation. We do not know what could happen anytime. Anything can escalate into a pogrom. Anything can lead to thousands of deaths. So it's a very precarious situation. And I believe there is no substitute to dua in this.
Yes. So yes, you're right. I did read about his report, and you mentioned that the ban has started to spread like wildfire, and there are examples of teachers now being sacked and being told to not wear hijab at school. A sister she posted about this. I saw a video where a sister went to vote, and it was in Tamil Nadu, and a man said to leave. You can't vote, but the people in the polling station said to him, "No, you leave." So alhamdulillah, they stuck up for the sister. But it's like like you said, they're getting very emboldened in thinking that the way they can
Absolutely.
treat the Muslims. And so
Exactly.
alhamdulillah. So those three. So sharing on social media, speaking about it, that's something that I've been doing and I'm going to continue doing. But everyone, there are Muslims who. So, for example, you're very active on Instagram. Would you say you are, or not really?
Definitely.
Yeah. So what would you like to share your Instagram handle? Because I've been looking at your posts. That's what I've been looking at, seeing articles and getting information. So your Instagram handle is.
Yeah, sure. I think you can add my Instagram handle in the description.
Okay, I'll do that, inshallah. Now, it's interesting what you said about protests, because I was actually thinking that is something I was thinking we need to have that in England, because we have a lot of Muslims here, and I know they would turn up for that, because we had a very big protest about in support of the Uyghur Muslims when we have Palestine protests. Alhamdulillah, mashallah, the Muslims in Britain always turn out because they love, we are one ummah, we are one body, and when
Alhamdulillah,
one
yes.
part hurts. And again, you're right, it's shaming India, and they need to be shamed. And that publicity needs to happen. So I've already got that in my notebook. Inshallah, that's something that we do need to organize. And sorry, what was the third one that you said? Dua.
Dua, the most important.
SubhanAllah. How can I forget that? Yes. And I think that is something, I think we have no excuse not to. Every single one of us can do dua. If we just include the Muslim, I know we do dua for Palestine, we do dua for the Muslims of Yemen, we do dua for the Muslims in the Uyghur Muslims of China. And now we need to add, it's sad that our list is growing longer and longer, but that is the least we can do
Definitely.
for the Muslims of India. But Alhamdulillah, you've also written an article for Traversing Tradition. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So inshallah, and what was the title of the article for the listeners?
Hindutva project versus the Indian Muslim women, I think.
Okay. So yeah, so Alhamdulillah, definitely traversingtradition.com. They also have another article, Islamophobia and the hijab ban in India. And so I think if we just make an effort to keep ourselves educated about this and keep speaking about it, because who else is going to speak up? If we're going to speak
Definitely.
up, who will?
And yeah, just because as Muslim women we are not finding a lot of support in the Indian society, or we are not finding any support beyond our own community. So when we see global Muslims speaking for us and protesting and demonstrating, it gives us a lot of moral support to carry on our resistance. So I think that means a lot.
Yeah, Alhamdulillah, it does. I completely understand what you mean. So inshallah, inshallah, we're going to practically start doing something to help. May Allah keep the Muslims of India safe, and and turn the oppressors away, and change change the current government to a government. Well, Allah will change the government to one that will not be oppressing the Muslims. That is ultimately what we need. And also, I do think the Muslim. I must admit, I've kind of given up on hoping that the Muslim governments will do something. Even I don't know if internationally any of them have criticized India, have really again publicly shamed them. Like, I don't know if Imran Khan has brought this up.
I am not sure. I'm yet to hear from governments speaking up against India or taking up in their parliaments. Maybe they are, or I'm just not aware.
Yeah.
But yes. So, but I think that the bigger thing is that when we talk about Ummah, we are not talking about the governments. We are looking at the people in different countries, how they are supporting us, how they are morally supporting us and speaking about us, because we can understand that the governments in a lot of places are oppressive, even though they pretend to be Muslims. They can be oppressive and they do not have our best interests at heart. So that doesn't mean that the global Muslims are not supporting us just because their government is not speaking up. We know we have seen a lot of support from global Muslim population, and I think that itself means a lot to us.
Okay. Yes. Alhamdulillah. I think you put that really well. Yeah. You're right. They may have Muslim or Islamic in the name, but they do not rule by Islam. And so, yes. So
Absolutely.
Alhamdulillah. I think the take home message for the listeners is that we really need to step up. If we're not going to step up now, I am so fearful that on the day of judgment, I will be asked, what did I do within my ability, within my sphere of influence? Allah will ask us, what did you do for your sisters? And that's a question we need to ask. What answer are we going to give on the day of judgment? Because
Absolutely.
it will be asked. But we do not play lip service to saying we are brothers and sisters. So
Absolutely.
I think that's something. I think we're going to end the podcast there, and inshallah I'll put details in the description of the podcast for where to find more information. But Jazakallah khair, Hanan, as usual, mashallah, thank you for coming. I hope to speak to you again very soon.
Inshallah. Thank you so much for calling. It was great being back here again with you. Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Mainstream media outlets do not cater for the needs of you as a Muslim. There are topics which they will completely ignore. For example, the hijab ban that is happening in India, the Islamophobia that Muslim women all over in the West are facing. They don't even report Palestine or Syria in a balanced manner. So through my podcast and my YouTube channel, I discuss the topics specifically related to Muslim women that Muslim media sometimes as well, particular mainstream popular culture, will not discuss. Topics like critiquing feminism, topics such as the number of hijab bans, niqab bans that are happening in India, in France, in Canada. These are challenges that Muslim women are facing. And I'm going to keep continuing to shine a light on these topics. So, inshallah, I would love your help and support in continuing to create this content for Muslim women, which is challenging the very negative Islamophobic narrative that we are being given. I think as a Muslim creator, we should be producing content that is Islamic, that is well researched, and provides hope to Muslim women and men that as Muslims, when we see an evil, we can change it with our hand, we can speak about it, or we can hate it in our heart. And I think some of us are able to create videos and podcasts, and others who are not able to do that, like yourself, you can support that work as well and gain in the reward, inshallah, by contributing and supporting to my Patreon page. The link is in the description below. Inshallah, may Allah reward you, and please do dua for all the Muslims around the world that we can continue to challenge this Islamophobic narrative, but always remember that Allah is with the right.